The mountain was collapsing around me, and I still had not found her. Rocks the size of my ship broke loose from the cliff above and rolled past me in the dark, and I pressed myself against the stone wall and counted the seconds between each tremor, the way my father taught me back on Earth before any of this began. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. The gaps were getting shorter. That meant the whole ridge was about to come down, and somewhere under it, trapped in a cave that was never meant to hold her, was a baby dragon who could not fly away. My name is Ethan Voss, and 6 months ago, I did not believe dragons were real. I was an engineer sent to this world to study rock formations for a mining company that no longer exists, because the company pulled out the moment they realized this planet was inhabited by creatures far older and far wiser than us. I stayed behind anyway. I told my crew it was because someone needed to finish the survey. The truth is simpler than that. The truth is a small gray dragon named Nara had looked at me with eyes full of shame on the day I met her, and I could not make myself leave a child who believed she was broken. Nara was born without wings. In dragon society, that is not a small thing. It is everything. A dragon without wings is treated like a mistake that should never have hatched, and by the time I found her, she had already spent 4 years believing the elders were right about her. She lived alone in the lower caves, far from the rest of her kind, because her own mother was too afraid of what the others would say to let her live anywhere else. I found her by accident on a routine climb, half-starved and hiding from a rock slide that had nearly buried the tunnel she called home. I gave her food, I gave her water, and when she finally spoke to me, her voice was so quiet I almost missed it over the wind. She asked me if I had come to finish what the mountain started. I told her no. I told her I had come to fix things, and that fixing things was the only skill I really had. She did not believe me, not that day, and not for many days after, but I kept coming back, climbing up through the frost and the thin air, bringing tools and food and stories about places far beyond her sky. Slowly, she stopped hiding from me. Slowly, she let me look at her back, at the smooth, pale scar where wings should have grown, and at the muscles underneath that twitched every single night, like they were trying to remember something they had never been given the chance to learn. That is when I had the idea that changed everything. I had spent years building mechanical limbs for survey drones, machines that could sense muscle signals and respond to them in real time. If a machine could catch the electrical whisper of a human nerve and turn it into motion, there was no reason it could not do the same for a dragon. It took me 3 months to build the wings. Real metal, light as bird bone, wired directly into a harness that would sit along her spine and listen to every twitch those old scarred muscles still made. I tested it 100 times on a wooden frame before I ever brought it up the mountain, because I knew if it failed in front of her, she might never trust anyone again, including herself. The day I finally strapped it onto her back, the whole cave went silent. Nara stood very still, breathing hard, waiting for the pain that never used to be far behind anything mechanical the humans built. Instead, she felt something else. She felt the wings twitch on their own, responding to the same nerves that had been reaching for the sky since the day she hatched. She looked at me like I had just told her the biggest secret in the universe. We started slow, small hops from low rocks, short glides across the frost grass behind her hidden cave. Every failure sent her tumbling into the snow, and every single time, she got back up before I could even reach her. I had never seen anyone try that hard for something the rest of the world had already told her was impossible. That should have been the end of the story. A quiet, hopeful ending on a quiet, hopeful mountain. But 6 days ago, everything changed, because the elders finally found out she was still alive. They came to her cave with cold eyes and colder words, telling her that a dragon wearing metal wings was not a dragon at all, that she was mocking everything their kind stood for. They ordered her to remove the harness and accept what she was born as. When she refused, they sealed the upper tunnels of the mountain with old dragon fire magic, trapping her deep inside with no way out, except through a path only I knew, a narrow drainage channel that led straight into the heart of the collapsing ridge. That is why I was standing in the dark with rocks falling around me, counting seconds between tremors, trying to reach a girl who had finally learned to believe in herself, right before the world tried to bury that belief along with her. I found the entrance to the drainage channel just as another tremor shook the ground. I dropped to my knees and crawled inside, dragging my pack behind me, my light bouncing off wet stone walls that groaned under the pressure of the mountain above. The tunnel narrowed twice, forcing me to squeeze through gaps barely wide enough for my shoulders, but I kept moving, because somewhere ahead of me, I could hear her voice, calling out into the dark, asking if anyone was there. I called back. I told her to keep talking, to keep making noise, so I could follow the sound, instead of getting lost in the maze of broken stone. Her voice grew steadier with every word, less afraid, more determined, and that alone told me she had not given up, not even trapped alone in the dark with the whole mountain threatening to close in around her. I found her in a small chamber near the back of the tunnel, wings folded tight against her sides, one leg pinned beneath a fallen slab of rock. She was scared, but she was not crying, and when she saw me crawl through the opening, something in her face shifted from fear into pure relief. I did not waste time asking questions. I braced my shoulder against the slab and pushed with everything I had, feeling the muscles in my back scream from the effort, while Nara pulled herself free the moment there was enough space to move. The second she was clear, another tremor hit, stronger than any before it, and a crack split across the ceiling of the chamber, like lightning frozen in stone. We had seconds, not minutes. I grabbed my pack and shouted for her to follow me back through the tunnel, but she hesitated, staring down at her injured leg, afraid it would slow us both down. I told her there was no time to be afraid of slowing down, only time to move, and I meant every word of it. She nodded, gritted her teeth, and limped into the tunnel ahead of me, while I checked the harness on her back to make sure the wings were still intact. The tunnel behind us collapsed the moment we cleared the first narrow gap, sending a wave of dust and debris rushing past us like a wall trying to catch up. We kept moving, faster now, guided only by the shrinking beam of my light, and the sound of our own breathing echoing off the walls. Twice, the ceiling dropped low enough that I had to push her forward with both hands, and twice, she pushed back just as hard, refusing to leave me behind even for a second. When we finally broke through the drainage exit and stumbled out onto the open ridge, the whole mountain seemed to exhale behind us, sending a final cloud of dust rolling down the slope like smoke from a fire that had just been put out. We collapsed onto the frost grass, both of us breathing hard, both of us alive, and for a long moment, neither of us said a single word. It was Nara who finally broke the silence. She turned to me, her injured leg tucked carefully beneath her, and asked why I had risked everything to come back for her, when the elders had already made it clear that a wingless dragon with metal wings was not worth saving. I told her the truth. I told her that the wings I built were never really about proving she could fly. They were about proving that being different did not mean being broken, and that anyone who tried to convince her otherwise was wrong, whether they were dragons, or humans, or anything else in this galaxy. I told her that courage is not the absence of fear, it is choosing to move forward anyway, and that she had shown more of it in one collapsing tunnel than most people show in an entire lifetime. She did not say anything after that. She simply leaned against my shoulder, careful of her injured leg, and watched the sun rise over the ridge where the tunnel used to be. Word of what happened spread through the mountain faster than any storm. The elders who once called her a mistake were forced to see the truth for themselves. A wingless dragon who had survived a collapsing mountain, not because someone carried her out, but because she chose, again and again, to keep moving forward on wings she was never supposed to have. Slowly, quietly, their cold words started to soften, though it would take much longer than one morning for old beliefs to fully change. As for Nara, her leg healed within a few weeks. And the first thing she did, once it did, was fly higher than she had ever flown before, tracing wide circles above the very cave that once hid her from the world. I watched her from the ground, the same way I had watched her take her very first flight, except this time, there was no fear in her movements at all, only pure, uninterrupted joy. I stayed on that mountain long after my survey work was finished, not because there was anything left to study, but because I had found something far more important than rock formations. I had found proof that being different was never the same as being broken, and that sometimes, the smallest act of belief can be enough to help someone rebuild the very thing the world once told them they would never have. Nara still flies over that mountain every single morning, wings catching the first light of dawn, and every single time, I remember the girl who once hid in a tunnel, believing she was a mistake, and the same girl who later crawled through a collapsing mountain, refusing to give up on herself. She was never broken. She was only waiting for someone to notice that she never stopped trying to fly.